Ruth, Taylor Swift is really good, isn't she? I think this might be the correct formula to net me at least one female viewer. Taylor Swift is really talented. My favourite Taylor Swift album is all of them, but Taylor's version. This is What If 54. What if Deathly Ed 1 had lived? I think that title is the only instance of the first Deathly Ed ever being called Deathly Ed 1. We have an issue based around the Marvel UK characters Deathly Ed and Deathly Ed 2. And we open with that hot woman. No, I'm not talking about Taylor Swift. It is Evelyn Necker. And she has come to find the original Deathly Ed depicted here. This is him. And she wants to hire him to stop a wayward creation, Deathly Ed 2. Now the story of this spins out of events in the Deathly Ed 2 miniseries. And I imagine a lot of readers of What If were a bit baffled by this issue. Both Deathly Ed characters were Marvel UK characters. And although the first ad made 2 guest appearances in US comics, I reckon more than a fair share of What If readers were oblivious to the miniseries or even the characters. Our point of divergence is from Deathly Ed 2 issue 1. In that one, Deathly Ed 2 murdered Deathly Ed and absorbed his memories and personality into his mainframe. Deathly Ed became the dominant persona in Deathly Ed 2 after that. Then we have the rest of that miniseries shown here. Deathly Ed 2's attempted assassination and attempted assimilation of Mr. Fantasticals. I reviewed that issue a month ago. And then we have the big fight at the end of the mini against Baron Hydra, who had taken control of and uploaded himself into the discarded original Deathly Ed's body. This time around, Deathly Ed teleports away before Deathly Ed 2 kills him. But then, Deathly Ed 2 continues on his mission, and he does successfully murder Mr. Fantasticals, and absorbs and gains all of his knowledge. But what ends up happening is, without the original Deathly Ed body, Baron Hydra takes up residence in Deathly Ed 2's body instead. I think the idea is that this isn't actually Baron Hydra, the one we know. This is one of his descendants born in the future of Deathly Ed 2. He is called Baron Hydra the Fifth. But I honestly think it works a bit more if we say it is the original. He has means of prolonging his life, and in this issue, I actually think the writer decided the same thing, or more likely made a mistake. For me, it just works better if the great evil is a villain we know, rather than his great-great-grandson. We have the other thing, which is, I have mentioned this in the other Deathly Ed 2 video, there's maybe a conflation of A.I.M and Hydra. Or, on the reverse side, it might not be a confusion at all. It might be paying acknowledgement to the origin of A.I.M as a Hydra offshoot. The idea is that Baron Hydra hates A.I.M and wants to destroy them. They betrayed him and ousted him. And here is Baron Hydra in Deathly Ed 2's body. I have used this as a cutaway a few times because the comics available on digital platforms starring Deathly Ed 2 are limited. Deathly Ed, the original, goes to recruit some Marvel heroes to help him stop Deathly Ed 2. First port of call is Fantastic Force, who are still reeling from the death of their leader. They are easy recruits. Plus, they have met Deathly Ed before, both in Deathly Ed issue 10, which I have reviewed, and then again in Fantastic Force 338. So then we have our ragtag assortment of Marvel heroes brought together to fight Deathly Ed 2. We have the 3 surviving members of Fantastic Force: Thing, Invisible Wife, and Human Fire, Captain America, Seaman, and that is it for the ones that make sense. I don't know how they came to recruit Luke Cage's, and I don't know why War Machine, nay, the real Iron Man, Rhodey Rhodes, I don't know why he came along. You would expect She-Hulks or Spider-Man, they would be obvious ones. Thor. Rhodey Rhodes even says he barely even knew Mr. Fantasticals. Now, stricken with grief, Invisible Wife is written as irrational and hungry for violence. And definitely unintentional. If you really wanted, I think you could make the argument that this is actually when she was possessed by Malice. Malice re-manifested in Invisible Wife's psyche in Affinity Worlds, and then later started feeding on and influencing her more and more after the death of Mr. Fantasticals in that run. You might remember though that I said Deathly Ed 2 issue 2 took place just before Affinity Worlds. That is still the case. This bit we have with Deathly Ed 2 killing Mr. Fantasticals happened before Affinity Worlds. The original Deathly Ed 2 miniseries happens before Affinity Worlds. But we are at the point where Baron Hydra has assumed control of a Deathly Ed's body. So we have reached the conclusion of the original miniseries. So at this point, Affinity Worlds is happening. Keep in mind, Deathly Ed and Deathly Ed 2, they are set in the future. The time flow of the Prime Marvel Universe, or a version of it, doesn't even have to be a consideration. However, we can say, if we want, Affinity Worlds could have happened without Mr. Fantasticals. Mr. Fantasticals was already dead before Affinity Worlds in this universe. And here is a neat thing. Unintentional. Entirely unintentional. Without Mr. Fantasticals in Affinity Worlds, he cannot be replaced by his double gagger, and he cannot get all the heroes together at Fantastic Force HQ, and he cannot set off a gamma bomb that destroyed half the building. So here we see Fantastic Force HQ intact. It's not intentional. I'll repeat again. It's not intentional. Maybe Rhodey Rhodes being in Affinity Worlds, in place of Mr. Fantasticals, Iron Man was the double gagger who brought them all together, and at Avengers House instead of Fantastic Force HQ. And maybe Iron Man was never saved. Iron Man and Mr. Fantasticals, and I think one or two others who were replaced off panel. I want to say Dartboard and Silhouette. They were afraid. They were found by Invisible Wife But without Mr. Fantasticals being among them, she wouldn't have had a real personal reason or motivation to have uncovered and found them. So maybe Iron Man died in Affinity Worlds, which is in keeping with What If, because Iron Man always died in them. I am overthinking it just because I think Invisible Wife is acting a bit crazy, which would be explainable enough down to her grief. But I don't like seeing someone like Grace Kelly being unhinged. But then, right here is the best and the worst part of the issue. We get to see the Marvel heroes fight Deathly Head 2. And for the first couple of pages, it is good. We're seeing the characters we like fight an evil Nazi bastard in a cyborg body. And they do alright against them. Invisible Wife enlarges a force field inside of them to incapacitate them. And then Thing drops a building on them. Then we get into what if territory. Basically, they all die. Captain America throws his shield, which is drawn far too small, in that panel of him throwing it. And Deathly Head 2 decapitates Seaman with it. And then he kills Human Fire somehow. And he does a T-1000 style eye poke with the real Iron Man. Deathly Head 2, he kills everyone except for Captain America, who he leaves for last. I don't like this. I know it's a standard thing for What If. I don't mind me heroes dying in these alternate realities. I just wish it was more substantial or heroic than this. What If 25, the SeaWorld Attacks one, I refer to that far too much. But that had characters like Thor and Mr. Doom. They went out like champs. I felt like their death wasn't annoying. They did everything they could, and they fell before the greater power. Rachel Ferrix, she got a whole splash page. That was her death. I'm not even sure what happened to half the heroes in this. Deathly Head 2 kills them in unclear ways. What the story is really about is our writer, Simon Furball. He and the artist, elderly Geoff, are the creators of the original Deathly Head. Simon Furball was pissed off about what Marvel UK had done to his character. So the real reason this story happens is so that Simon Furball can vicariously live out some revenge on Deathly Head 2 for murdering Deathly Head. Captain America dies off panel, and Baron Hydra referred to him as his old enemy. That was the thing I was referring to when I said it might be the Baron Hydra we all know. Now, originally, I was thinking this was quite petty. Don't get me wrong, the way they offed Deathly Head was not respectful and done with such glee. But I thought having a whole issue where you have Deathly Head kill Deathly Head 2 while also killing off Captain America and Fantastic Force, it felt like a lame response. However, I am quite interested in Marvel UK, and it turns out Paul Neely, the editor-in-chief of the 90s Marvel UK line, he did not respect Deathly Head at all, and he was pushing to kill him off to cement the new Marvel UK. He wanted rid of him. The thing that I think exposits how unfairly he treated Deathly Head is that you might know, they ran a Deathly Ed reprint series in the 90s, The Incomplete Deathly Eds. Paul Neely was resistant to that. He never wanted to reprint those stories. He hated the character and the Marvel UK that existed before he took over. Paul Neely didn't want to reprint them. He only let that series be published with new stories starring Deathly Ed 2 inserted as Furman sequences. So in the end, I ended up on Simon Furball's side. Let Simon Furball obliterate Deathly Ed 2 in an alternate reality. At the end of the day, Deathly Ed is the character that infrequently still appears in comics to this day. The original has proven more significant than his 90s remix. That's not to say that the 90s version is bad, but I hope that Simon Furball is glad to know that in the end, his was the one that mattered more. There was some stuff I wanted to talk about in this one, and I didn't. Like that Deathly Ed has a weird design in this, and I realised it is a nice tie-in to the continuity. Sprat, the kid that follows Deathly Ed around, he tried to rebuild Deathly Ed's body in the miniseries by using ad parts, and it was that body that Baron Hydra took over. And so, in a world where Deathly Ed didn't die, Sprat will have helped repair him after the fight with the same ad parts. If you like Deathly Ed, either of them, I think you might enjoy this. If you like the main Marvel heroes, I don't think you will. I don't like it all, but I like some of it. Deathly Ed 7, thumbs up.